Morning Margaret Voss lost everything. She was wearing her best suit. That detail stayed with people who were there. The charcoal Armani, pressed the night before. The pearl earrings her mother had given her at 35, with the words, "You've earned these." She had walked into the Meridian Capital boardroom at 7:42 in the morning looking like someone who owned the room because for 11 years she had. By 9:15, she didn't own anything. The vote was unanimous. 12 faces she had hired, promoted, defended in lawsuits, taken to dinner in cities across 4 continents. 12 faces that looked away when the chairman read the resolution. Effective immediately. Loss of confidence. Fiduciary irregularities. Those were the words they used. Words chosen by lawyers to sound clean, to sound inevitable, like weather, instead of a decision made by people who had decided she was more useful as a scapegoat than as a leader. She didn't cry. She had taught herself not to a long time ago in a different boardroom in a different city, watching a different man take credit for work that had kept a company from collapse. She had learned then that tears in a room like this were currency you spent badly. She picked up her leather portfolio from the table. She uncapped her pen and set it beside the resolution they wanted her to sign. She looked at each face, one by one, slowly, the way her father had taught her to look at people when they were lying to you. Then she signed. Then she walked out. The elevator was empty. The lobby was not. There were photographers outside already. Someone had tipped them off. Someone always tipped them off. And she stood for a moment behind the glass doors of the Meridian Tower, watching the flashbulbs pop in the gray November morning like small, cold explosions. Her assistant, Priya, appeared at her elbow and said nothing, just handed her a coffee that Margaret didn't take. Priya had been with her for 6 years. She was already looking at the floor. "It's okay," Margaret said, though it wasn't. "I'll call you." She never called her. The apartment she moved into was on the 3rd floor of a building in Bridgeport, 12 miles from the glass tower where she had kept an office on the 31st floor. The lease was month to month. The refrigerator made a sound at night like a dog trying to bark with something caught in its throat. The couple upstairs argued in Portuguese every Thursday, and she found herself lying awake listening to them, strangely comforted by the noise, because at least someone somewhere was still fighting for something. The lawsuits came in January. 3 of them, each one a story about her decisions, her risk assessments, her signature on documents she had signed in good faith because she had trusted the numbers that other people had given her. That was the thing no one wanted to hear, that you could be wrong while trying to do everything right. That the woman who had rebuilt Meridian's portfolio from 62 million to nearly 400 million over a decade could, in the same motion, miss what was buried 6 layers deep in a subsidiary's books. Her attorney, a careful man named Foster who wore the same brown shoes every time they met, told her the civil exposure was manageable. He said manageable the way doctors said we'll keep an eye on it, meaning nothing was fine but nothing was immediately catastrophic. He charged $450 an hour, and she paid him from an account that was shrinking every time she looked at it. She started taking walks, long ones, directionless, through neighborhoods she had driven past for years without ever really seeing. She would leave the apartment at 7 in the morning and walk until her feet hurt and then walk some more, and sometimes she would stop somewhere for a coffee and sit at the counter and watch people come and go, people with places to be and things to do and lives that looked, from where she was sitting, like they were moving forward in some discernible direction. She was 41 years old and she had no idea what came next. The diner was called Ruby's, though there was no evidence anyone named Ruby had ever been associated with it. It was on Clement Avenue, between a dry cleaner and a place that sold discount mattresses, and it had the particular quality of light that old diners have, a yellowish warmth that makes everyone inside look slightly more tired than they probably are, and somehow more honest because of it. Margaret started going on Tuesdays, then Thursdays, then most mornings because the refrigerator in her apartment made that sound and the silence of the rooms was a kind that pressed against her. She always sat at the same stool at the counter, the one with the small crack in the vinyl that she covered with her coat. She ordered the same thing, black coffee, wheat toast, 2 eggs over easy. She tipped more than she should have, out of some residual guilt about the years she had ordered room service in hotels, and left nothing because the charge was already on the bill. She didn't talk to anyone. She wasn't there to talk. It was a Wednesday. She had broken her Tuesday-Thursday pattern because the solitude had started to feel like a punishment she was administering to herself when she first noticed the man with the little girl. He came in just after 8. He was maybe 35, broad-shouldered, in a canvas work jacket that had seen real work, not the kind people buy at outdoor retailers for the aesthetic. He had dark circles under his eyes that suggested sleep was something that happened to other people, and a child on his hip, a girl maybe 5 or 6, with 2 uneven pigtails and a green backpack shaped like a turtle. He slid the girl into the booth across from Margaret's stool, and the girl immediately opened the backpack and produced a coloring book and a single orange crayon, which she examined with the seriousness of a surgeon selecting an instrument. "I only have the one color," the girl announced to no one in particular. "Orange is good," the man said, already reaching for the laminated menu with the efficiency of someone who had sat here many times and knew exactly what he was going to order anyway. "Orange is the best," the girl agreed, and began to color. Margaret looked back at her coffee. The eggs came. She ate them slowly, listening without meaning to, listening to the man tell the girl that yes, she could have hot chocolate, but she had to eat something real first, and no, the hot chocolate did not count as something real, and yes, he knew it had milk in it, and yes, milk was technically food, but that was not the point. The girl ate scrambled eggs with the focused concentration of someone completing a required task, and then she drank her hot chocolate with the satisfaction of someone who had earned something. Margaret paid her check. She put on her coat. She was halfway to the door when the girl called out, "I like your earrings," and Margaret turned, and the girl was looking at her with complete, uncalculating sincerity, the orange crayon still in her fist. "Thank you," Margaret said. "I like your backpack." The girl looked down at it. "It's a turtle," she said, as if this were the most important fact Margaret would learn that day. "I can see that," Margaret said, and then she left. She went back on Thursday. The man was there again. Same booth, same canvas jacket, different child. No, it was the same child, just with her hair down this time, loose around her shoulders and a purple crayon instead of the orange one. Margaret didn't mean to sit close enough to hear them. The diner was fuller than usual, and the stool she normally took was occupied, so she took the one at the end of the counter, which was closer to the booth than she was used to. She heard him on the phone. He was speaking quietly, and she wasn't trying to listen, but the diner had a particular acoustics problem near the end of the counter. She had noticed it before, the way sound from the booths collected there, and she heard enough to understand that he was talking to someone about a schedule, and that something had fallen through, and that he needed to cover a shift, and that he was sorry. He knew it was short notice. He wouldn't ask if he had another option. He hung up. He put the phone face down on the table and looked at it for a moment. "Is everything okay, Daddy?" the girl asked without looking up from her coloring. "Everything's great, Bug," he said. The girl looked up. "You're doing the face," she said. "What face?" "The face where everything is not great, but you don't want me to know." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're too smart," he said. "I know," she said, and went back to the purple crayon. Margaret put $3 extra under her coffee cup when she left. She learned his name was Ruben because she heard the waitress, a woman in her 60s named Dot, who seemed to run Ruby's through sheer force of personality and institutional memory, call him that while setting down his coffee without being asked. She learned that his daughter's name was Sophie because he used it approximately every 45 seconds, in the way parents do when they're both addressing their child and reminding themselves that this small person is theirs and they are responsible for her. She learned that he worked in maintenance, building systems, HVAC, something mechanical, because she heard him talk about a broken compressor unit one morning with the specificity of someone who knew exactly what he was talking about and had fixed many of them. She learned that Sophie's mother was not in the picture, not from anything said directly, but from the particular way he organized their mornings, the backpack check, the breakfast, the careful management of time that had the quality of a system built by someone who had long ago stopped expecting backup. She did not tell him her name. She did not tell him anything. They existed in the diner in adjacent orbits, two people who had been coming to the same place long enough to register as familiar to each other without crossing into the territory of acquaintance. This was fine. This was how Margaret preferred it. In March, she got a call from her attorney. The civil cases were consolidating. There was a possibility, not a certainty, but a possibility, of personal liability extending beyond what her director's insurance would cover. He said numbers that she wrote on the back of an envelope and then stared at for a long time after she hung up. She went for a walk. It was raining, a thin, determined March rain that found its way under collars and into shoes, and she walked for 2 hours through it, not noticing she was soaking through until she stopped at a light on Carmody Street and felt the water in her left boot. She thought about the resolution, unanimous, 12 faces looking away. She thought about her father, who had run a hardware store in Decatur, Georgia for 30 years and had built something real with his hands, and had never once, as far as she knew, put his name on a document he didn't fully understand. She had thought she was different from those men, the ones who signed without understanding, who trusted without verifying. She had prided herself on the rigor, the diligence, the 70-hour weeks spent inside the numbers. She had been wrong, or she had been right and it hadn't mattered, which was somehow worse. Standing at that light in the rain, she thought for the first time with complete seriousness, I don't know how to start over. The light changed. She crossed the street. She went back to the apartment with the refrigerator and its dog bark sound, and she sat at the kitchen table until dark. She was at Ruby's the next morning, though she hadn't planned to be. The rain had stopped, but the sky still had the spent look of a storm that had done what it came to do. Ruben was in his usual booth. Sophie was not with him, first time Margaret had seen him there without her, and he was reading something on his phone with the focused frown of someone dealing with news that required attention. His coffee was untouched and cooling. He looked up. For a moment he didn't say anything, and neither did she, and it was the first time since they had existed in adjacent orbits that they actually held eye contact, and she could see that something was wrong. And she knew with the uncomfortable certainty of recognizing a familiar state that whatever it was serious. "She okay?" Margaret asked. She didn't know why she asked it. Sophie wasn't her concern. He looked at her. "Sophie," he said. She's at school." He went back to his phone. Margaret turned back to her coffee. After a moment he said, "Sorry, it's work thing." "You don't have to explain," she said. "No, I know." He set the phone down. "I'm being let go. Company I've been with 8 years. They're switching to automated diagnostics, and they don't need, apparently, a team of actual people who know how the systems work." She didn't say "I'm sorry" because she found those words, in the face of real loss, to be almost insulting in their smallness. She said, "What kind of systems?" He looked at her properly for the first time. "Building management, HVAC, electrical, that kind of thing." "Do you work commercial or residential?" "Both. Mostly commercial. Last few years, high-rises, hospital campuses." "I know some people," she said before she decided to say it, "and facilities management for some of the larger downtown buildings. I don't know if—" "You work in that industry?" "No," she said. "Finance." She paused. "I used to." He nodded, not pressing. "My name's Margaret," she said. "Ruben," he said. He almost smiled. "I've seen you here a lot." "Yes." Dot refilled her coffee without being asked. Outside, someone was having an argument with a parking meter. An argument the meter was winning. "What happened?" Ruben asked. Quietly, not intrusively, more the way people ask in diners, in that specific quality of morning light, when the ordinary rules of social caution feel less necessary. She looked at her coffee. "I ran a capital management firm," she said, "for 11 years. Last October, the board removed me. There are legal proceedings. The short version is that someone I trusted put bad assets inside a structure I signed off on, and when it unraveled, I was the most convenient signature." She had not said that out loud to anyone except her attorney, and saying it aloud in a diner to a man she barely knew felt strange, and also, in some way, she couldn't quite account for, like putting something down that she had been carrying. "That's brutal," he said. "Yes," she said. "It is." Sophie's turtle backpack appeared to hang in the booth between the two of them, even though it wasn't there, just the particular sense of another person seeing you clearly and not looking away. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "I've been asking myself that for 5 months, and I don't have an answer." He nodded. He picked up his coffee, which was cold by now, and drank it anyway, the way people do when they've forgotten about it, and it doesn't matter. "Sophie had surgery last year," he said. "Appendix, but it went sideways. She was in the hospital for 11 days. He looked at the table. "I missed a big inspection, the kind that was the whole reason I was brought on a project. I asked for time. My supervisor said no. I chose Sophie." He paused. "I got let go then, too. Different company." "How long did it take?" Margaret asked. "To find something else?" 4 months. He looked up. "Long 4 months. But," he shrugged. One shoulder, the particular shrug of someone who has been through hard things and come out the other side and made a kind of peace with the cost. "She's okay. That's the part that matters." Margaret thought about the 12 faces looking away in a boardroom in November. She thought about the resolution, unanimous. She thought about her father's hardware store and the things he had built with his hands. "I think you're right," she said, "about what matters." He looked at her for a moment. "You'll figure it out," he said. "The other thing, the work thing." "I'm not sure I will." You seem like someone who figures things out, he said, simply without flattery, just an observation. She almost said I used to be. She stopped herself. They talked most mornings after that, or some mornings, not every morning, not with the pressure of obligation, just the natural shape of two people who had discovered they could exist in the same space without performing anything. She learned things in pieces, the way you learn things about people in diners. That Ruben's mother had come from Guadalajara when she was 19 and had cleaned office buildings for 22 years and put him through 2 years of community college, and then a technical program, and then told him, on the day he got his certification, that she had already decided he was going to be fine, that Sophie's favorite color was the specific shade of orange that she called real orange, as opposed to a false orange she found aesthetically unacceptable. That Ruben had been trying to get his contractor's license for 3 years, working toward it in the hours between putting Sophie to bed and needing to sleep himself. She told him about her father's hardware store. She told him about the city of Decatur in summer, the particular quality of heat, the way her father had smelled at the end of a workday of oil and sawdust, and something she had never been able to name but associated completely with safety. She did not tell him about the nights in the Bridgeport apartment. She didn't need to. He seemed to understand that certain silences were not voids but contents. In April, she got an email from a former colleague, a woman named Sandra Reyes, who ran a small hedge fund out of an office in River North and who had watched the Meridian situation from a distance and formed her own conclusions. The email said, "I know what actually happened. If you want to consult on something, call me." She stared at the email for 3 days. On the 4th day, she called Sandra Reyes. The consulting work was small at first. 3 hours reviewing a risk framework, a written assessment, a flat fee that was a fraction of what she had earned monthly at Meridian, and felt, in its smallness, more genuinely hers than any of it had. Sandra was careful, exacting, not interested in charity. She wanted Margaret's actual judgment, not her name or her resume, and the distinction turned out to matter enormously. By May, there were 2 more calls, then a referral, then a firm in Cincinnati that needed an independent review on a transaction structure that looked, on the surface, exactly like the structure that had buried Meridian. The same depth of layers, the same particular way the liability was distributed, and she saw it in 45 minutes. The buried thing. The thing that would have taken someone else days to find or might not have been found at all. The attorney called in May with an update. The civil consolidation had shifted. One of the other defendants, a man named Castillo, who had been the actual architect of the buried structure, had reached a separate settlement that included a disclosure. The disclosure moved the liability. They did not absolve her entirely, but it changed the shape of the exposure significantly enough that Foster used the word manageable again, and this time it sounded like he meant it. She sat in her kitchen with the phone in her hand after he hung up, and she thought, okay, not fine, not back to where I was. Just, okay, there is a path forward from here. She saw Ruben on a Thursday in early June, a warm Thursday when the door to Ruby's was propped open and the smell of the city in early summer came through. Exhaust and hot pavement and somewhere someone's flowering tree, improbably persistent. He was smiling. Sophie was with him, as usual, working on something that was no longer a coloring book, but what appeared to be an elaborate hand-drawn map of an imaginary place, with borders and place names and what might have been a mountain range rendered in careful pencil. "She's making a country," Ruben said, when he noticed Margaret looking. "I'm the queen," Sophie said without looking up. "Ruben is the prime minister. He handles infrastructure." "That tracks," Margaret said. "You could be the minister of finance," Sophie offered, looking up now with the particular directness she deployed when she had made a decision. Margaret looked at Ruben. "Don't look at me," he said. "She has final authority over cabinet appointments." "I would be honored," Margaret said. Sophie nodded, satisfied, and returned to her map. Ruben had gotten the contractor's license the week before. He had found a partner, a man he'd worked with 7 years ago who ran a mid-sized maintenance and systems company on the northwest side, and there was a conversation underway about a formal arrangement. Steady work, a stake in something instead of a salary. He talked about it with the careful optimism of someone who had been disappointed before and knew the difference between a thing that was real and a thing that merely looked like it. "The hospital campus contracts are the key," he said. "If we can get into that pipeline, the rest of the book builds itself. The problem is the bonding, the financial guarantees they require up front before they'll even consider you." He stopped. She was looking at him. "Margaret," he said. "I have contacts in the hospital authority's procurement office," she said, "and I know the structure they need to see to approve a new vendor bond." He was quiet for a moment. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said. I'm offering. He looked at her the way people look when something has surprised them past their ability to manage their expression, when the prepared response doesn't come because the thing that happened wasn't the thing they were prepared for. Why? He said. She thought about it, not to fill the silence, because she wanted to give him an honest answer, not a quick one. Because you told me I seemed like someone who figured things out, she said, when I didn't believe it, and because you're building something real. She paused. And because Sophie has been extremely clear about the importance of sound fiscal management in her country. Sophie, without looking up from the map, said, very important. Ruben laughed, a real laugh, not a polite one, the kind that comes up unexpectedly and means the person is genuinely surprised by something. And then he said, okay, yeah, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Margaret said. The procurement process has 17 steps. I know, he said. I've been trying to read up on it. I'll send you the framework tonight. She went back to her coffee. Outside, the city continued its noise. A truck backing up somewhere, two people on the sidewalk debating something with the arm gestures of people who care deeply about the outcome. A kid on a bicycle threading between them without slowing down. The bond cleared in August. The first hospital campus contract came through in September. It was a maintenance services agreement for a mid-sized regional medical center on the northwest side. Exactly the kind of anchor contract that could hold the rest of a portfolio together. The kind that said to the next client, someone else trusted us first. Margaret heard about it from Ruben on a Thursday morning, same booth, same diner, Sophie present and engaged in the detailed governance of her imaginary nation, which had by now acquired a railway system and an electoral process that Sophie was in the process of designing from first principles. He didn't make a big thing of it, that was, she had come to understand, simply how he was. He didn't make big things of things that mattered. He mentioned it the way he mentioned the weather or what Sophie had said on the bus, as something that was simply part of what was happening, real and present and not requiring amplification to be significant. It went through, he said. I know, she said. Sandra had told her the day before. Congratulations. He looked at his coffee. I keep thinking about last March, he said. When I found out I was being let go, I sat here for 2 hours staring at my phone. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had Sophie's school fees, the rent, my mother's. He stopped. And then you started talking to me like I was a person, not a problem. Margaret looked at her eggs. You already knew what you were going to do, she said. You had the plan. You had the license in progress. You had the relationship with your potential partner. You just needed the bonding structure and the contact. She shook her head. I handed you a door. You'd already built the hallway. He was quiet for a moment. Still, he said. Still, she agreed. Dot brought a third coffee without being asked, which was Dot's way of indicating that a conversation deserved to continue. She moved out of the Bridgeport apartment in October, not to something grand, a 2-bedroom in Lincoln Square, a neighborhood she had always liked from the outside and had never lived in, with wood floors and a radiator that knocked pleasantly in cold weather and a window in the kitchen that let in the morning light at exactly the angle that made the room feel, for about 45 minutes every day, like somewhere had thought carefully about. The refrigerator did not make any sounds. She thought the first night about the 12 faces in the boardroom. She thought about them less than she expected to. They had already become what they were going to be, a thing that had happened. Part of the story of how she had ended up in Ruby's diner on Clement Avenue, which was the part of the story she was more interested in now. She called her father that night. He was 72 and still went into the store most days, though he said it was just to check on things, which was what he had been saying for 4 years. He had the hardware store smell, even on the phone. Somehow, she could swear she heard it in the way he breathed when he picked up. She told him about the consulting work. She told him about Sandra's firm, the Cincinnati transaction, the way the Meridian liability was reshaping. She told him about the Lincoln Square apartment and the window in the kitchen. She did not tell him about Ruby's, or about Ruben, or about Sophie's ministerial cabinet, because some things you hold privately for a while before you know what to call them. You sound like yourself again, her father said. She thought about that for a moment. I think I might be someone slightly different, she said. I'm not sure yet. That's fine, he said. You were due. The first cold day of November, almost exactly a year from the morning of the board resolution, Margaret Voss walked into Ruby's diner at 7:48 in the morning wearing a coat she had found at a consignment shop in Lincoln Square. Not Armani, nothing close to Armani. A well-made wool coat from a brand she didn't recognize that fit her almost perfectly and had good pockets. Ruben was already there. Sophie was drawing what appeared to be a constitutional amendment in the margin of a spiral notebook. Margaret sat at the counter, the usual stool, the crack in the vinyl almost worn smooth now from the months of her coat covering it, and ordered black coffee and wheat toast and 2 eggs over easy. After a moment, Sophie said, without looking up from the constitutional amendment, "Mom's bringing cupcakes to school today, for the birthday." There was a particular kind of silence that sometimes exists in diners, not an empty silence, but a full one, a silence that contains more than what's being said. Margaret did not say anything. Ruben did not say anything. Sophie looked up, realized what she'd said, and looked between the two of them with the clear-eyed assessment of a child who has learned to read rooms accurately. "Sorry," Sophie said. "I meant Grandma." "It's okay, Bug," Ruben said. "The cupcakes are red velvet," Sophie said, which was her way of changing the subject to something incontrovertibly positive. "Red velvet is good," Margaret said. "Red velvet is the best," Sophie said, and she went back to the constitutional amendment with the orange crayon, real orange, the right kind held in her fist like a small certain flag. Outside, November was doing what November does, pressing its gray, insistent weight against the windows of the diner, making the yellow light inside feel even more like something deliberate, something chosen over the alternative. Dot refilled the coffee. Someone's phone played a fragment of music, 4 notes, before it was silenced. The door opened and closed and opened again, and the cold came in and the warmth held. Margaret picked up her coffee with both hands the way she had started doing somewhere in those long Bridgeport mornings. Not for the warmth exactly, but because it was the kind of gesture a person makes when they have decided, without announcing it to anyone, that they are staying. I keep thinking about the morning Margaret walked into that boardroom in her best suit, not because of what happened inside, but because of what she was still carrying when she walked out. 11 years of decisions made in good faith, a reputation built one careful choice at a time, and the particular kind of silence that follows when the people you trusted most look somewhere else in the room. What I've come to understand sitting with this story is that what happened to Margaret wasn't just a professional collapse. It was a reckoning with the difference between the person she had trained herself to be, controlled, precise, unshakable, and the person she actually was underneath all of that. Someone who still knew what her father's hardware store smelled like at the end of a workday. Someone who, given enough stillness, could find her way back to her own judgment. That's the part that stays with me. Not the lawsuit, not the boardroom, the diner. Because what Ruben did, showing up every morning with Sophie, handling the hard thing quietly, building toward the contractor's license in the hours after his daughter went to sleep, that wasn't luck or circumstance. That was a kind of integrity that doesn't announce itself. The kind that keeps going when there's no one watching and no reward in sight. He didn't have a safety net. He had a 5-year-old with 2 uneven pigtails and an orange crayon, and he built around her anyway, steadily, without complaint. And Margaret recognized it. I think that's the thing that doesn't get said enough, that we recognize goodness when we're quiet enough to see it. She had spent a decade inside systems designed to obscure the real structure of things, and she had missed what was buried in those layers. But she did not miss Ruben. She saw him clearly, the way you sometimes see clearly, when everything else has been stripped away. There's something in that about what it actually means to be smart. Not credentials, not the ability to move fast in a room full of people who expect you to, but the capacity to slow down, look at what's actually in front of you, and respond to it honestly. Margaret had the first kind of intelligence for years. She found the second kind in a diner on Clement Avenue, over wheat toast and bad coffee when she had nothing left to protect. And then there's Sophie, 5 years old, already mapping the borders of an imaginary country, already thinking about governance and infrastructure and what her Minister of Finance ought to understand. I don't know what to call that except a kind of persistence that gets passed down, not in words, but in the shape of how a parent shows up every day, even when the day is hard, even when the options are limited, even when the coffee has gone cold and the phone call did not go the way they hoped. What I take from Margaret and Ruben isn't a formula, it's more like a reminder that the people we dismiss, the ones we let go, overlook, fail to really see, carry things we don't know about. Capability, loyalty, a willingness to extend grace that none of us have fully earned, and that when we are the ones who have fallen, the way back is rarely through the people who watched us fall, it's through the ones we almost missed entirely. The coat Margaret bought at the consignment shop fit her almost perfectly and had good pockets. I think about that detail more than I probably should. It wasn't the coat she wore when she owned the room. It was the one she chose when she was learning, slowly, how to stay.